Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. One of the main teachings of this tradition is there's no sin, there's no evil. These are related teachings. There's no sin, there's no evil, there's nothing wrong. Everything is beneficent, there's only auspiciousness, and everything is perfect from the beginning. So how many of people sitting here actually think that they have a real feeling for that? Or is it just words?
Yeah.
Moments.
Once in a while. I've tasted that.
And how many of you still largely go about your day as if there's something wrong with you and there's evil in the world and everything's flawed and all that stuff? There's sin and all that stuff.
I don't think that I think there's evil in the world, but I definitely go around thinking there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to taste it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that there is no right or wrong, there's only like just being appropriate in a given moment, responding to it.
Mm-hmm. Being appropriate. That's good. Using your wisdom and being appropriate. A huge part of the practical part of our practice relates to these teachings. So we have these absolute teachings. There's no evil, there's no sin, there's nothing wrong, everything's fine. And the practical part of the teaching that we apply in everyday life is look for the wisdom in every situation. What is beneficent about all of this? What is auspicious? I mean, one of the names of Lord Shiva is the auspicious. Why is it auspicious? Well, we could say because something else that you probably only have an intermittent experience of. So I could sit up here and say, well, because everything's made of compassion and intelligence and mercy and curiosity and blah, blah, blah. Some of you have that experience now and then, or some of the time, but not enough of the time to really yank yourselves out of your normal blah way of relating to everything. However, we also do very often have the experience of wisdom, being in different kinds of situations. I mean, this is a very common human experience. That, for instance, we lose a home, or like our house burns down in a fire, let's say, or we get a disease, or someone breaks up with us and we didn't want them to, or we lose a job, or something like that. And although we suffer and we don't like it, 7 times out of 10, we have enough clarity to be able to, at some point, start to see the wisdom in it. So in that sense, we do have quite regular experiences of the auspiciousness of life. That even when we're in the midst of something that feels terrible, that we can look into it and at least eventually find out that it was actually doing us some good. Right? How many people have had this experience? You know, almost everybody, or if not everybody. So there is your connection in that experience. You can find your connection to this absolute teaching. Well, I mean, take a step back for a minute. isn't it weird that we find wisdom in horrible things? It's not, I mean, if we look at every possible reality or that we can think of, we can certainly think of realities that could be where that wouldn't be true. Where horrible things would just be horrible, we would never learn from them, and they'd have nothing to teach us. But that is not the world that we live in. That is not the reality that we live in. And what happens as we get older? Let's imagine yourself at age 12 or 13 or 14, and you have a crush on somebody, and you go out on one date, and then they never call you again. They ghost you or something. They block you on Facebook. Whatever people do to each other now. And there you are at 12, 13, or 14, just railing at the universe and feeling like this is the most horrible thing that could have possibly happened to anybody. As you get older, you learn, right? We're good adaptive learners. As we get older, the more things like that we go through, we adaptively learn to look for the wisdom in them, even if we don't have any spiritual teachings at all. I mean, there's some people who are in retrograde motion in this lifetime. There's some people who don't have the clarity to be able to see the wisdom in painful circumstances. But I think it's pretty much 7 out of 10 people who do. So that's good. That's pretty much the highest we get of being able to see wisdom. And as we get older, we adaptively learn so that painful circumstances, actually, we start looking for the wisdom sooner, right? I mean, those of you that were out of your 20s, I think everybody here, not everybody, but not quite. But I think the longer you go along, and those of you that are older maybe have this experience, the more quickly you start to look for, well, what's helpful here? Or what did I need to learn? Or something like that. Right. So in that ubiquitous experience, which really there's no reason why it should be like that, other than that circumstances are full of wisdom. And we have the capacity to notice that and adapt to that and learn. So there you have a really big connection that everybody has an experience of to something that, in this tradition at least, is taught as a cosmological or existential fact, that this alive, aware reality has no other orientation other than goodness. Can you think of anything else that's part of your, maybe not everyday life, but ordinary life that demonstrates this to you?
I guess there's the thing you say about how whatever situation happens, 10 people will respond differently. Mm-hmm. And so just that fact of like something in the world and somebody else that like I think is like wrong and somebody else finds like wonderful. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. That helps understanding that there is no one inevitable response to any circumstance, no matter how horrible, can really help to widen our view and help us to understand that our responses to things are not caused by circumstances. They're caused by how we are. Okay. Anybody can think of anything else?
Remembering the absolute.
Mm-hmm. Does that help you?
Yeah, at times.
Mm-hmm. So we can do that, and it helps. I was thinking of feeling your own goodness, right? And that's something that we emphasize a lot, or feeling your own, the promptings of your own innate wisdom. Where is that coming from? Isn't that weird? That you would like have some sort of inner sense of wholesomeness or goodness or rightness in a way that doesn't have an opposite of something evil, just like this rightness in and of itself. When we have a kind of a argument with ourselves about should I go in one direction or another, and we start adding up pros and cons, that's just an intellectual exercise, or an exercise in taking our karmas out for a walk. Yeah, it really doesn't have anything to do with anything other than karmic patterns. That sense of rightness or goodness that we feel about when we ask ourselves a question, should I do this or that, or should I get into this circumstance or not, there's that boom, that sense that's beyond any pros and cons. It doesn't really have anything to do with that, right? Where the heck does that come from? The beauty of a tradition like this is that everything that we teach, everything that's in the absolute, has many, many, many examples of it in our very ordinary everyday life. And we should always look to our everyday ordinary experience to find confirmation of the teachings about the absolute nature of reality. This works because of what I started out talking about, which is that everything here, in a sense, is a living symbol of that supreme reality. Or you could say everything here is a reflection of that. There is nothing happening here that in some way doesn't lead us, if we were in the right circumstance, to understanding more about that supreme reality. And so the whole practice works because we can just work with our everyday lives and have contact with that supreme reality through engagement in a special way with our everyday lives. That's the whole premise, the entire premise on which our sadhana functions. It's why there's so much emphasis on paying attention to your everyday life, because in that everyday life is the absolute expressing itself, as I just tried to point out. And we can also see that quality of mercy and compassion that's everywhere in the way that our practices function, the way that our sadhana functions. Why do we have sandhi in the breath? Why do we inhale and have a gap and exhale and have a gap? It could be a different way, right? It doesn't have to be that way. And yet, 26,400 times a day, we have an opportunity to make contact with unconditioned Shiva nature, or whatever you want to call that, living presence, at the beginning and the end of every breath. So that, when we contemplate how our practice actually works, that we can use our breath, and we can use our bodies, and we can use our voice, and we can use our mind, and we can use our senses, everything we already have. That is also evidence of the kindness and auspiciousness and benevolence of this reality, of existence. That we've been given all these tools. Right, built in, comes with. No a la carte, it all comes with. Would anyone like to say anything?
I was thinking that often what gives me that sense of auspiciousness is just connecting with nature.
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at, just perceiving the light, or perceiving air, or looking at a flower that makes me feel full of joy and in that sense of that everything is perfect and good.
Mm-hmm. But the very fact that you and others can experience nature that way it's not that nature is the way it is, it's that we actually can connect and get that from nature, right? Using our own senses and who knows what else, right? In the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, one of the main practice manuals of this tradition, there are very, very simple techniques for getting contact with unconditioned presence. And one of them is staring at a flower. We do that in various teachings. There's something about the sadhana of just gazing at a flower that opens your mind into some other less conditioned state. Very, very simple. And as I've mentioned other occasions, there are instructions for being tickled or sneezing, and paying attention to the state that you're in when, like if someone tickles you and then they stop, or you sneeze and then right after you sneeze, that you should pay attention to this condition of your body, energy, and mind right in those moments, and you'll discover something about Shiva nature. Right. We don't have to sneeze. We don't even have to be ticklish, but we are. And those things are usable. There are instructions for eating a beautiful meal with friends and then pausing after the meal to just immerse yourself in a feeling of contentment, and how that is akin to the state of God consciousness. A feeling of fullness and contentment and love because you're with friends. These things are already completely built into us and into our circumstances. What Ma said was very simply, the Father is in the Mother, meaning Lord Shiva is in Shakti, in all of this. Not somewhere else, built in, immanent it's called in the philosophical world. Meaning something that's saturated into something else, right? Coming out of it, not on top of it or higher than it or something.
Is there how do you contact your own goodness? Is that like, I just don't get how to do that?
Mm-hmm. You have to have a consistent practice of trying. So basically when you don't get how to do it, what it means is that at one time you knew how to do it naturally and it wasn't even a question. And then some things happened and you got into other patterns and your energy got diverted into other patterns, and then it's like a map that you forgot or a road that you forgot how to get on again, right? So in order to get back there, you have to do something every day to try to remind yourself, and it's difficult because when you get into a condition where you have lost some capacity, like lots of people have lost the capacity to visualize, or this is the Kali Yuga, we've lost stuff, and we have to work to regain them. It takes time, and you have to be willing to be frustrated in your effort until a little light begins to leak through. One of them, were you here when we did the Hiranyagarbha meditation, the golden egg? Mm-hmm. So there are meditations you can do, mainly involving the center of your heart space. And there are other techniques for kind of regaining the moment when that wisdom surges to tell you something. So let's say that someone says to you, do you want to have dinner tonight? And an immediate surge of wisdom happens. It's like no, or yes, whatever it is. And then you miss that moment because you're not used to connecting with it, right? And then so almost in a split second, you start thinking about it. And maybe anxiety wells up about the whole circumstance for some reason, and you don't know what to do. And you just make some fumbly decision and do something or other. But there's always that moment when your wisdom heart surges and tells you the best thing for you to do. And it's a feeling. It's not a thought. And that's part of your goodness. A big part of your goodness. So there's meditations you can do, and you have to do them consistently, or you can try to catch those surges when your whole something's just like, there, that's the answer, no more thinking required, right? And you have to follow that, and just without question. The more you follow that, the more you feel your goodness. It's not just that is your goodness / wisdom, and then you feel it more. It's that following it increases your access to it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's something easier for me, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mean easier than a seated practice?
Yeah, I mean, I want to have a consistent seated practice again, but it is easier for me to just be like, quick thing, I don't know what it means, follow it. Like, that feels like divination to me.
Yeah, so if you live your life like that, always following that, no matter what it tells you to do, then you're going to discover your goodness. And you're going to discover a tremendous confidence in life. We really are required to think very little in order to navigate life. Thinking is mostly just in our way, because wisdom is immediate. It may come as a thought, like a yes or a no or something, or some other thought, but it won't be an intellectual thought. It's a special kind of a thought, right? It's hard to describe what it feels like, but it doesn't feel like something intellectual. And it doesn't have any anxiety attached to it. There may be actual fear attached to it. Like, anxiety is different than fear. So you may feel fear in agreeing to follow your own wisdom. Fear of loss, fear of gain, fear of difference, fear of change. I mean, all the things we're afraid of, right? But when you follow it, there will be a radical subsidence of anxiety. And that's how you can always tell it was real. When we follow our ordinary mind in its karmic patterning, then the anxiety always comes back immediately. Just we're on to the next decision with the same anxiety we always had. But following what Trungpa called first thought, best thought, but it's really not so much a thought. I mean, it really originates from here more than from here. My experience doing this, because this is one of the earliest teachings I ever had, was learning how to identify that surge and follow it. And it just gave me tremendous confidence in the whole enterprise of waking up. Because it's 100% infallible. 100%. Like divination done well. And where does it come from? It doesn't come from ordinary sources according to our ordinary mind. It comes from nowhere. So you begin to have tremendous confidence in that nowhere. It's the difference between what I always call the flat world and the round world. I've been trying to find that source and I can't. So some unnamed person from India said this once on a radio program, I think. I was trying to find, I searched and searched and searched recently because I want to put it in my new book, and I write an article about it, and I wanted to credit this person with having given me this idea, but I just can't find it. So now I'm convinced it wasn't an article, it was just like a passing remark, like on an NPR talk show or something like that.
Yeah, I looked and looked and looked too, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, so there's other uses of this to mean where flat world means a world with economic equality, but that has nothing to do with what this person was talking about. So apparently there was some famous book about that. But anyway, what this person said was that the flat world is like the WYSIWYG world, that what you see is what you get. It's the mechanical, materialistic, mechanistic world, populated only by objects, humans, and animals, things you can see, right? With no subtle energy or any of this woo-woo stuff. Whereas the round world, which this person I'm thinking I remember said, something like, most of the people live in the round world. The world where you're accompanied by ancestors and where there are other realm beings and where you can relate to something that might be called spirit or energy, and where possibly you don't think of this life as being the only one, and where the world just has a lot more dimension than the flat world. So when we start to follow this inner wisdom, we enter into the round world. It's one of the gateways, right?
I have a question back to your own goodness topic. When you say...
We could just call it yog. It's a horrible
Yog.
That's a horrible word. So speaking of yog, so when you say your own goodness and practices in the heart space, and I think I get what you're talking about, but is it the same or different from experiencing presence? Because you've talked about how some people experience presence, like during open-eye meditation, as something outside of themselves, and some people experience it inside, and really it's in both places.
Right. So at first, in the beginning, when you first start to experience it, it might happen that you think it's out there or you think it's in here. But then at some point, you're going to realize it's the same, and that you are that, and that is you. And that's when the real experience of non-duality gets going.
And how does that relate to when you say your own goodness? Because I guess that term just makes you think like, oh, it's only in me.
No, it's everywhere. So when these wisdom virtues can be experienced directly everywhere, in a formless way and a form way. So nirupa and sarupa, right? Without form and with form. They're very tangible, and so one way of experiencing it is all the different ways that we talked about in the beginning, like that we can learn from circumstances, and we can practice with things that are already built into our bodies and whatever else we mentioned. Those are evidences of goodness with form. We could think of some, or being able to gaze at a flower or go out in nature and experience some connection. But it's also possible to experience it without form, nirupa. So it's possible to, for instance, just be gazing and have a very profound experience of the wisdom virtues of everything. Right? But in both ways we can experience it. And as it says in the 15 verses of Abhinavagupta, having had a profound experience of it in one way, we begin to experience it in all ways.
That's all.
Mm-hmm. So when I say your own goodness, I'm saying that because people are in a certain condition. Because it isn't helpful to say, stare into space and find goodness. That really wouldn't work for most people, right?
Just stare into space.
Yeah, we'll all just sit around and we'll be the stare into space cult. Just do that and everyone will leave. There are many, 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 many ways to discover this because it's everywhere. So how could there not be many ways? If you love God, if you love your tradition, if you love your teacher, if you love Ma, if you have that feeling, then doing service in the context of a spiritual community, it will be an amazing refuge. You will feel your goodness. You will feel your serving goodness. And by feeling that you're serving goodness, you will feel your own goodness. No matter what, especially if you have a lot of self-hatred or self-loathing or self-doubt or any of those horrible feelings, then service to what you experience goodness in is going to make you feel your goodness. Not just feel good, but feel your goodness. Those are kind of different. We can feel good when we eat an ice cream or, shoot up or whatever. It's not really that hard to feel good temporarily in some impoverished way. But to feel our own goodness, especially if we're beset by self-doubt and loathing, self-criticism, if that's like a serious pattern in our lives, then serving what we see goodness in and feel goodness in is a very direct way to experience our own goodness. I definitely feel that. I mean, serving Jayakula, serving you. I don't, I have so many ways I'm not a great practitioner. And I know every practitioner feels that. Like from the greatest to the lowest, every practitioner feels they're not a great practitioner. That's just what I've noticed as I've gone along, right? The more you go along, the more you realize how little you're actually doing. But the fact that I can spend my entire day, every day, doing service for Jayakula, that to me is more of a validation than any spiritual experience I have ever had, or any spectacular thing that's ever happened, or any realization that I've ever had. The fact that I get to spend my entire life in service is, to me, just mind-bogglingly affirming and wonderful. Couldn't even begin to express how I feel amazement at that.
You said it's more of a validation. You said it's more of a validation.
Yeah, of being supported. To get an opportunity to serve what you find the highest goodness in is a validation. It's support for you. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.